So I want to talk about the situation for the Neuro, the Montreal Neurological Institute. And here's what's going on. And none of this is really news, right? We know this. Quebec's population is aging, and it is aging quickly. It's expected that by 2071, the number of people age 85 or over could nearly triple, which means now Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, and other brain conditions will increase as well. And that's something the Montreal Neurological Institute has been dealing with since its existence. So the problem now is, great, we have a wonderful institution, a world-renowned institution, but it's running out of space, and the space it does have is aging. Like a couple of other hospitals in this province, we know those stories. They would like to move to the Glen site, which seems to make an awful lot of sense, given that all the other major, hospitals we're dealing with now, the Vic, the Children's, etc., the General, are all there. But when I read the story, I thought to myself, okay, I don't see a downside in here. All, the facts stated in the story make sense, right? We know that the infrastructure is not as good. It's basically bursting at the seams in this old facility. So what's the issue? Dr. Lucie Opatrny is an executive director of the MUHC, and she's on the line. Dr. Opatrny, thanks for the time this afternoon. Am I missing something here? Everything makes sense. Why is this an issue?
Well, thank you so much for having me this afternoon. So the Neuro is the main problem actually for the Neuro right now is where it's located, that it's isolated. So it's on top of University Street, and it used to be physically attached to the Vic, and so it was attached to the Vic, which had a blood bank. It had a laboratory for testing blood samples and other specialists. And with the move to the Glen site, the Neuro is now very isolated, as you mentioned very well, in a building that can no longer be renovated very easily. And so the need to move it to the Glen is great. And so I guess the main element is the cost that it needs, and there are other needs in the province. So it's to understand the dire need and the importance that this has, not just to Montreal, but really it is an issue and a gem for all Quebecers.
So with respect to government, because obviously when you talk about money, that's the first thing we have to deal with here. We know that for Maisonneuve-Rosemont, the government, at least Christine Frechette, I think a couple of weeks ago, said $700 million it will help free up. We know it's the busiest hospital in Quebec. To the same extent, the Neuro is not just a Montreal hospital, right? I believe over half the people who use the Neuro come from other parts of Quebec.
Exactly. So the Neuro is, and the Neuro is not, it's more known actually outside the Quebec borders almost internationally than it is known inside. So it is a world-renowned institute with cutting-edge research, researchers from all around the world that want to come and who do work there, both in the research and clinical areas, delivering very high-end care in physical conditions, though, that need to be moved. And as you mentioned, give care to more than half come from outside the island of Montreal. There are groups of and even families of patients that have certain genetic diseases that have expertise at the Neuro, right, or for example ALS and others. And so you mentioned, for example, the money that was freed up for Maisonneuve-Rosemont that's been on what's called the PQI, the Plan Quinquennal d'Infrastructure. So something has to be on that list for it to be so-called unblocked, and it was on that list for a long time. And so what we're working now with Santé Québec is for the clinical plan of the Neuro to get on that list to be able to be funded.
So, I read today, the editorial, of course, written by a doctor suggesting this has to happen. We demand that it happen. What can people do, if anything, to kind of spur a decision on this to happen quicker, or is there anything they can do?
I think that what we need to do as a larger community is, what works well is when we, raise our voices and state the importance that the Neuro has to them or to their family or to the community from either a personal standpoint or research standpoint. And we have, to that effect, we have a kudo board on our website that people can who've been treated there can add adds to that. And really to raise awareness of what the neuro meant to them. Of course, we also have all kinds of discussions at different levels to see how to move this project forward, because it's recognized in both at Santé Québec and at the government level of its expertise and role.
Yeah, which is the issue, right? If it's recognized already, and as I said off the top, there's no part of this that says, well, that's not really a good idea. All of it is a good idea beyond, a structure that's kind of, past its peak, if you will. And you mentioned, the idea too, now that the Vic is gone and it's not next door anymore, this is a matter now of transporting patients back and forth and back, which is another, difficult thing to have to do. At least on the Glen site, you're all together with all the other medical facilities that are there. So if the government's aware and the government's on board, is this simply a matter of funding? Is that the issue?
There aren't a lack of, definitely funding is a huge issue because there are a huge amount of hospitals across Quebec that are in need of upgrade in their infrastructure. But in terms of the neuro, it has definitely been evaluated as one that is in great need, and so in terms of the needs assessment, it's really way up there. And so fortunately, what we have been doing is that we're working on a clinical plan and going back and forth with Santé Québec with the goal to see how to have it pass for the next, what we call the étude de crédit, which is the next budgetary session. Is our huge wish with respect to the neuro.
Yeah, I don't want to rain on the parade, but when I hear you say that, especially after having said what you did about Maison of Rosemont, how many years that had been in that stage, and here we are finally years later rebuilding that hospital, I wonder if this is a matter of not a year or two, but maybe 5 or 10.
Well, I think that there's a bigger and bigger recognition about the need of not just having new establishments that are ribbon-cutting areas, but the need to upgrade and take care and maintain that infrastructure that we have. And this one really it falls in that category of new because, as we talked about, the isolated nature. Think when there's an Alouettes game. It is incredibly difficult for ambulances to get up University Street to bring a patient with a stroke to the neuro. It's difficult for patients and nurses to access. There's often, Park Avenue is closed for construction. So at the best of times, it's difficult to get there. And then imagine there's no construction. Well, its isolated nature is really hard. There are patients that are in the intensive care unit. There are patients that are getting operated on. And to not have on site a blood bank or a laboratory to analyze tests is far from ideal. And so for those reasons, to bring it onto the Glen site, we already own the land, and there's already a place earmarked for it. It just makes plenty of sense. And in fact, it was what was planned even back in 2016.
Well, I mean, I wish you well, and obviously anybody who's ever had, an experience with the neuro or knows someone who has, obviously hopes that this actually happens. I asked you before, we have to wrap up, but with respect to people who are listening now and said, you know what, I want to do whatever I can to help. I want to make this an issue. I want to make it a cause that moves forward. Can they go on your website, you said, and just add a comment? What can they do?
Absolutely. So there's a website. They can go on the MUHC website, and in the neuro at the neuro, there is a kudos board where they can add their comments.
Terrific. Doctor, I thank you for the time. Very much appreciated. I hope we get to chat again.
Thank you so much.
Take good care. Dr. Lucie Opatrny, she is, of course, Executive Director of the MUHC. Again, to what she just said at the end, there's already a designated area at the Glen set aside for the neuro. That's like half the battle right there, right? It's not as if we have to start from scratch. So I hope the government moves on this one because, as I said, when you look at the aging population here and how much we rely on the neuro already, this is I don't think anything could be more important than that. So let's hope the government actually comes through, whatever government it is, and provides that funding and that plan.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers.
I think we need something new.
Discover iHeart New Music. Always fresh, always first. Stream now on the free iHeartRadio app.